The clock stopped at 11:47 p.m. Eastern, on the night of March 10, 2026, when every Iranian state broadcast channel cut programming simultaneously, and a 56-year-old man in a black turban walked to a podium and spent 12 minutes dismantling every assumption the White House built this war on. Curious Mojtaba Khamenei spoke for 12 minutes, and not a single word was directed at the Iranian people. Every syllable, every pause, every deliberate construction of language was aimed at one address, 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And as of this moment, on March 11, 2026, that building has said absolutely nothing back. Sighs. Here is where we are right now, and I need you to stay with every single detail because what unfolded on March 10th is not what the headline version is giving you enough framework to fully process. As of 6:14 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, the United States government has issued zero public response to what Iran announced last night. Zero. The president, who has averaged 14 Truth Social posts per day since his inauguration, has not published a single word. The White House press office has gone completely dark. Secretary of State Rubio has issued nothing. And inside the White House Situation Room, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, and a rotating cast of senior military commanders have been locked in that room for 6 consecutive hours without a single public statement of any kind. That silence is not caution. That silence is the sound of an administration that received an ultimatum and has not yet located a response that does not amount to either capitulation or catastrophe. Let me give you the architecture of how we arrived here in Saus because the setup is the story. 12 days ago, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury. 3 stated objectives: destroy Iran's nuclear infrastructure permanently, eliminate the existing supreme leadership, and engineer a governing transition favorable to Western security interests. President Trump announced the operation himself. Internal planning documents projected total operation completion within 7 to 10 days. The foundational assumption was that killing Ali Khamenei would hollow out the Iranian state from the inside, that factional competition would erupt in the power vacuum and effectively collapse the Islamic Republic. That assumption was wrong. Not wrong at the edges, fundamentally wrong. Within hours of Ali Khamenei's confirmed death on February 28th, the IRGC had already made their decision. No scramble, no vacuum, no factional war. They backed Mojtaba. They pressured the assembly of experts. They got their result in 12 days, while American ordnance was still falling on Iranian soil. The operation designed to terminate the Islamic Republic handed it to a younger, more extreme, more aggressive supreme leader, selected specifically because Washington opposed him. Now, the March 10th address. The structure of this speech matters as much as its content. For the first 6 minutes, Khamenei delivered the familiar catalog, the assassination of his father. 47 years of economic sanctions, American military presence across Arab sovereign territory. Every major network reported those 6 minutes and called it standard hardline rhetoric. They stopped there. What happened at the 7-minute mark is what the coverage is not giving you sufficient room to understand. At the 7-minute mark, Mojtaba Khamenei stopped cataloging the past and started architecting the future. 3 demands, transmitted simultaneously in the public broadcast and through the Swiss diplomatic back channel directly to the State Department. These are documented preconditions, each with explicit compliance timelines, each paired with explicit declared consequences. Demand 1. All United States military forces must begin withdrawal from Iraq, Syria, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia within 30 days of March 10, 2026, not subject to negotiation. 30 days. That is 40,000 U.S. military personnel ordered out of their forward installations in less calendar time than Congress requires to schedule a subcommittee hearing. Demand 2. The United States must lift every sanction imposed on Iran since 1979, every banking restriction, every oil export limitation, every technology transfer ban, the full architecture of 47 years of coordinated economic pressure dismantled within 60 days. Demand 3. The United States must pay formal reparations to Iran for what Khamenei documented as costing over $800 billion across 4 decades. The reparations figure he placed on the table: $500 billion structured across 10 years. Let that number land: $500 billion in formal reparations from the United States to Iran as a precondition for not escalating a war the United States started. And then came the consequences for non-compliance. These are not the consequences of a nation that is losing. Consequence 1. Iran will close the Strait of Hormuz to all commercial shipping, automatically upon expiration of the April 9th deadline. The strait carries 20% of the world's daily petroleum supply. Energy economists project U.S. retail gasoline prices between $6 and $9 per gallon within 90 days of disruption. Consequence 2. Iran will formally activate defensive military partnerships with Russia and China, including the explicit possibility of Russian and Chinese military bases on Iranian sovereign territory, foreign military installations in the Persian Gulf. The strategic implications of that single sentence dismantle every security framework the United States built across the region over 40 years. Consequence 3. Iran will exercise its right to develop and deploy, and the specific word here carries enormous weight, a full-spectrum nuclear deterrent capability. He did not say Iran would pursue a nuclear weapon. He said Iran would deploy one. Pursue is a program still in development. Deploy is an existing capability awaiting a political authorization decision. That language, delivered on March 10th, transmitted through official diplomatic channels, is the most consequential nuclear signaling statement issued by any government since the Cold War, and it arrives precisely 3 days before the CTBTO releases its full seismic analysis of an anomalous underground event recorded 8 months ago on Iranian territory, generating a signature consistent with a nuclear detonation. Those two facts do not sit next to each other accidentally. While Khamenei was delivering that address, something else unfolded simultaneously. At 1:15 a.m. Eastern, 90 minutes after the broadcast concluded, Chinese state media released a formal statement. China recognizes Iran's legitimate security concerns and supports Iran's sovereign right to defend itself against foreign aggression. 40 minutes later, Russia issued structurally identical language, 2 permanent UN Security Council members. 90 minutes, both publicly endorsing Iran's position on the same night the ultimatum dropped, and Asian oil futures markets opened. Within 3 hours, Brent crude jumped 18%, now trading at $121 per barrel as of March 11th morning. S&P 500 futures dropped 4% before circuit breakers halted trading entirely. Gold reached its highest recorded price in history. Bitcoin collapsed 22% as institutional capital fled into traditional safe havens. The global capital markets are assigning real probability to Iran following through. At 4:30 a.m. Eastern on March 11th, a classified Pentagon document landed at the Washington Post, marked Top Secret, dated March 10, 2026, produced hours before Khamenei's address. The document's conclusions are now matters of public record. The current military campaign has achieved tactical degradation of Iranian infrastructure, but has failed to achieve a single original strategic objective. Iran retains sufficient ballistic missile capability to strike American positions indefinitely. Nuclear facilities in deep underground bunkers remain structurally intact, and achieving the operation's originally stated objectives would require a sustained ground invasion of minimum 200,000 troops over 18 months at a cost of $3 trillion, with an estimated 15,000 American casualties. The administration launched this operation promising swift surgical victory. Its own military's classified assessment says the war is unwinnable on the terms publicly promised to the American people. That document did not reach the Post accidentally. Someone inside the Department of Defense made a deliberate decision to hand that assessment to journalists on the exact same night Iran delivered its ultimatum. That is not a leak. That is a signal from inside the American military establishment that the gap between what political leadership is claiming and what military leadership actually assessed has become too wide to contain. Now the emergency session, because this is not being reported completely. At 1 a.m. on March 11th, the President, Vice President, Secretary Rubio, Secretary Hegseth, National Security Advisor Waltz, and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General C.Q. Brown convened inside the White House. The agenda was a single question: how does this administration respond without appearing to surrender and without entering a ground war? The military just said they cannot win. The meeting became heated. Rubio argued for immediate public rejection of all demands paired with massive airstrike escalation. Hegseth pushed back, pointing at the Pentagon document, arguing the military lacks resources to intensify the Iranian campaign while maintaining commitments in Europe and the Pacific. Waltz raised the China variable. If Washington rejects negotiations and China moves weapons support openly to Iran, the strategic balance shifts permanently. General Brown delivered the room's most uncomfortable moment. He told the assembled leadership directly, if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, the United States has two options: accept it, or go to war to reopen it, which means striking Iranian coastal defenses, which means engaging Russian-manufactured S-400 systems currently deployed on Iranian soil, which means the risk of Russian casualties, which means direct escalatory confrontation with a nuclear-armed state. The president asked one question: can we win this without American boots on the ground inside Iran? General Brown's answer, according to 3 people in that room, was no. Not with active support from China and Russia, not if the nuclear program is further advanced than pre-war intelligence projected. Decision: delay all public response for 48 hours. While Swiss back-channel diplomacy probes whether Iran's demands are an opening position or a final ultimatum. The problem with that strategy is arithmetically simple. Every hour the United States stays silent while Iran's ultimatum sits on the table, the silence itself becomes the message. Now understand who delivered that ultimatum. Born September 8, 1969 in Mashhad, 9 years old when his father helped architect the 1979 revolution, 18 when he served in the Iran-Iraq War, a conflict where declassified DIA documents confirm the United States provided Iraq with battlefield intelligence while Saddam's military used chemical weapons against Iranian combatants. Mojtaba Khamenei was in uniform on the receiving end of that intelligence sharing. He absorbed it. For 27 consecutive years, from 1999 through 2026, he served as the primary institutional interface between Iran's supreme leadership and the IRGC command hierarchy. In 2009, when millions of Iranians flooded the streets in the Green Movement, he reportedly personally directed the IRGC's suppression operation. The movement was crushed, leaders imprisoned, people killed. The man who supervised that suppression is now the supreme leader. U.S. Treasury sanctioned him in 2019. That sanction is now 7 years old. And the man it targeted just delivered a nuclear-backed ultimatum to Washington. Here is the economic reality translating all of this into numbers every American household is already measuring. Gas prices are up 60 cents per gallon in 10 days. Airlines announced fare increases and route cancellations this morning. Shipping costs across every major logistics corridor are surging. Inflation that had finally decelerated is accelerating again in real time. The Federal Reserve is trapped. Raise rates to combat energy-driven inflation and accelerate a recession, or hold rates steady and watch consumer prices compound upward. The economic damage from Operation Epic Fury is no longer projected. It is being measured in every American's wallet this week. Reports from sources close to the administration describe a president who is isolated and visibly angry, fixated on identifying the Pentagon leak source, repeatedly asking advisors why Iran is still operationally functional if American forces destroyed their infrastructure. Defense analysts have a term for that gap between promised outcomes and documented reality. They call it the reality gap. Staff are managing his media access. They are controlling who gets proximity to him, working to prevent public statements that lock the administration into positions the evidence cannot support. So here is exactly where the 30-day clock stands as of March 11, 2026. Mojtaba Khamenei delivered a formal ultimatum on March 10th. Withdraw from 7 nations, lift 47 years of sanctions, pay $500 billion in reparations by April 9th, Or Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz, installs Russian and Chinese military bases on Iranian soil, and deploys a nuclear capability his specific language implies already exists. The Pentagon's own classified document concluded the war is unwinnable, without a ground invasion Congress will never authorize. Brent crude is at $121. The S&P halted on futures. Gold is at its highest recorded price. China and Russia publicly endorsed Iran within 90 minutes. 7 Americans are dead. 40,000 remain deployed inside the ultimatum's geographic scope. European allies are creating careful professional distance from the American position. What historians ultimately record this moment as depends entirely on the next 72 hours. If the United States enters negotiations on Iran's terms, regional allies lose faith in American security guarantees immediately. Saudi Arabia begins accommodation arrangements with Tehran. Israel moves toward independent military action. American credibility across the Middle East collapses in ways that take decades to reconstruct. If the United States rejects negotiations and the campaign intensifies, oil climbs toward $6 to $9 per gallon. The global economy slides toward recession. European governments pressure Washington to accept a ceasefire. Congress refuses to authorize a ground war. The administration is trapped between humiliation and catastrophe with no viable path between them. Beijing sees the opportunity precisely, not merely to support Iran, but to position China as the credible diplomatic broker that resolves a Middle East crisis the United States created and then could not close. That demonstration, conducted publicly, with the entire world observing, communicates something about the redistribution of global power that no military exercise can subsequently reverse. Moscow is running its own arithmetic simultaneously. Every American military asset committed to an extended Iranian campaign is an asset unavailable for European or Pacific contingencies. A prolonged, resource-intensive conflict in Iran serves Russian strategic interests with a precision that no Russian planner could have engineered deliberately. And a United States desperate for an Iranian exit may be pressured into negotiated concessions on Ukraine, NATO expansion, or European security architecture in exchange for Russian diplomatic assistance in Tehran. Britain, France, and Germany have all issued carefully calibrated statements this morning calling for de-escalation and dialogue, none of them backing the American military position unconditionally. A divided Western alliance cannot effectively pressure Iran, and Iran knows it. The reality this administration now confronts, the reality no messaging infrastructure can dissolve, is this. Killing Ali Khamenei did not terminate the Iranian government. It created a more radical IRGC-backed successor who accepted power knowing exactly what war he was inheriting. Sustained precision airstrikes did not break Iran's will. They hardened it. American military power cannot resolve every category of strategic challenge through force alone. Some conflicts have no military solution. The classified Pentagon document dated March 10, 2026 says exactly that. At the political update, we are monitoring the Swiss back-channel communications currently active between American and Iranian diplomatic representatives. We are tracking every move toward the Strait of Hormuz. We are watching the CTBTO seismic report due on March 13th. The report that could confirm Iran already tested a nuclear device 8 months ago and already possesses the capability Mojtaba Khamenei said last night he would deploy. When the White House breaks its silence, we will break down what the language reveals about their actual strategic position. When the CTBTO report releases, we will be here the moment it publishes with the full analysis. Subscribe, notifications on, because the most consequential 72 hours in American foreign policy in a generation begin right now. This has been the Political Update. The silence from the White House is still holding, and every minute it holds, the clock keeps moving.